Welcome everyone to class 4 of our issues in psychology. We've got Sal DePasquale and Dr. Terry Bordan with us today. And without further ado, I'm going to let Sal take it away.
Okay, well, I'm going to hope that everything works properly today because we've had a lot of changes going on with the Zoom system, and it may or may not cooperate with me. Today, we're going to talk about worldview, examine the concept of the worldview. This is how a person sees the world around them. It includes their inner voice that tells them what they are observing. It provides a narrative filling in information that is not yet evident. It is based upon existing biases that create a paradigm establishing a predisposition. A person's worldview is fed by information from neurons, most of which are communicated quietly in the background, away from our awareness. This information stored in neurons may be formed before birth from previous ancestors. Consider, for example, that you unexpectedly observe a police officer summoning you. What enters your mind? You haven't spoken with the officer yet, but your brain is talking to you. Consider if your thoughts would change based upon your racial or ethnic makeup. Okay, now let's consider the notion of love at first sight. Let's say you encounter an attractive person, but you have no information about the person, such as who they are, what are their attitudes, character, or anything else. But you speak with the person. You may view the person, but I'm saying before you speak with the person, you may view that person as simply a rich, pretty boy.
Teresa.
I think we have another voice happening in here. So if everybody will mute themselves.
Yeah, I muted them.
Or you look at this attractive person and you say, oh, I know I would love to kiss her. I bet she is a good kisser. These ideas are formed and projected onto the person. It's not necessarily, you don't really know anything about them. Let me see if I can get this one to work. This is kind of a lengthy clip, but I think you'll find it entertaining.
Have you ever seen yourself through the eyes of someone else that you have become? And looked at yourself.
It just killed out on us.
From? What should we do? And where are we going?
Why are we here? Well, that is the ultimate question, isn't it?
What is reality?
What I thought was unreal now, for me, seems in some ways to be more real than what I think to be real, which seems now more to be unreal.
Can't explain it. And anybody who gets too lost and anybody who spends too much time trying to explain it is likely to get lost forever down the rabbit hole of mysteriousness.
I think the more you look at quantum physics, the more mysterious and wondrous it becomes.
Quantum physics, in very succinctly speaking, is a physics of possibilities.
These are questions. These are addressing questions of how the world feels to us, of whether there's a difference between the way the world feels to us and the way it really is.
Have you ever thought about what thoughts are made of?
I think some of the things we're seeing with the children today is a sign that the culture is in the wrong paradigm and not appreciating the power of thought.
Every age, every generation has its built-in assumptions that the world is flat, that the world is round, etc. There are hundreds of hidden assumptions, things we take for granted that may or may not be true. Of course, in the vast majority of cases, historically, these things aren't true. So presumably, if history is any guide, much about what we take for granted about the world simply isn't true. But we're locked into these precepts without even knowing it oftentimes. That's a paradox.
Modern materialism strips people of the need to feel responsible. And often enough, so does religion. But I think if you take quantum mechanics seriously enough, it puts the responsibility squarely in your lap, and it doesn't give answers that are clear-cut and comforting. It says, yes, the world is a very big place. It's very mysterious. Mechanism is not the answer, but I'm not going to tell you what the answer is because you're old enough to decide for yourself.
Is everyone a mystery? Is everyone an enigma? And we certainly are.
Asking yourself these deeper questions opens up new ways of being in the world. It brings in a breath of fresh air. It makes life more joyful. The real trick to life is not to be in the know, but be in the mystery.
It's time to get wise.
Why do we keep recreating the same reality? Why do we keep having the same relationships? Why do we keep getting the same jobs over and over again? In this infinite sea of potentials that exist around us, how come we keep recreating the same realities? Isn't it amazing that we have options and potentials that exist, but we're unaware of them? Is it possible that we're so conditioned to our daily lives, so conditioned to the way we create our lives, that we buy the idea that we have no control at all? We've been conditioned to believe that the external world is more real than the internal world. This new model of science is just the opposite. It says what's happening within us will create what's happening outside of us.
There's a physical reality that is absolutely rock solid, and yet it only, if you want to put it this way, it only comes into existence when it bumps up against some other piece of physical reality. That other piece may be us, and of course we're partial to those moments, but it doesn't have to be either. It could be just some incidental rock comes flying along and interacts with this fuzzy mass of stuff, and sure enough, it provokes it into a particular state of existence.
And there were philosophers in the past that said, look, if I kick a rock and I hurt my toe, that's real. I feel that, it feels real, it's vivid, and that means that it's reality. But it's still an experience, and it's still this person's perception of it being real.
Scientific experiments have shown that if we take a person and hook their brains up to certain PET scans or computer technology and ask them to look at a certain object, and they watch certain areas of the brain light up, and then they've asked them to close their eyes and now imagine that same object. And when they imagine that same object, it produced the same areas of the brain to light up as if they were actually visually looking at it. So it caused scientists to back up and ask this question. So who sees then? Does the brain see, or do the eyes see? And what is reality? Is reality what we're seeing with our brain, or is reality what we're seeing with our eyes? And the truth is that the brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers, because the same specific neural nets are then firing. So then it asks the question, what is reality?
We're bombarded by huge amounts of information. It's coming into our body and we're processing it, coming in through our sense organs. It's percolating up, and at each step, we're eliminating information. Finally, what is bubbling up to consciousness is the one that's the most self-serving.
The brain processes 400 billion bits of information a second, but we're only aware of 2,000 of those. But our awareness of those 2,000 bits of information are just about the environment, our body, and about time.
We're living in a world where all we see is the tip of the iceberg, the classical tip of an immense quantum mechanical iceberg.
You got a lot of shots to develop? Oh, bummer. Well, I'll catch you later.
If the brain is processing 400 billion bits of information, and then our awareness is only on 2,000, that means reality is happening in the brain all the time. It's receiving that information, and yet we haven't integrated it.
The eyes are like the lens, but the tape that's really seeing is the back of the brain. It's called the visual cortex. It's right back here. It's like this camera, and it's tape. Did you know that the brain imprints what it has the ability to see? Now, this is important. For example, this camera is seeing a lot more around me than what is here, because it has no objection and no judgment. The only movie that's playing in the brain is what we have the ability to see. So is it possible our eyes, our cameras see more than what our brain has the ability to consciously project?
Well, the way our brain is wired up, we only see what we believe is possible. We match patterns that already exist within ourselves through conditioning. So a wonderful story that I believe is true is that when the Indians, the Native American Indians on the Caribbean islands saw Columbus's ships approaching, they couldn't see them at all because it was so unlike anything they had ever seen before. They couldn't see it.
When Columbus's armada landed in the Caribbean, none of the natives were able to see the ships, even though they existed on the horizon. The reason that they never saw the ships was because they had no knowledge in their brains or no experience that clipper ships existed. So the shaman starts to notice that there's ripples out in the ocean, but he sees no ship, but he starts to wonder what's causing the effect. So every day he goes out and looks and looks and looks, and after a period of time, he's able to see the ships. And once he sees the ships, he tells everybody else that ships exist out there because everybody trusted and believed in him. They saw them also.
Yeah. Well, come to here. Okay, so Professor Noah Harari tells us that scientific insights into the way our brains and bodies work suggest that our feelings are not some uniquely human spiritual quality, and they do not reflect any kind of free will. Rather, feelings are biochemical mechanisms that all mammals and birds use in order to quickly calculate probabilities of survival and reproduction. Feelings aren't based on intuition, inspiration, or freedom. They are based on calculation. He adds, we usually fail to realize that feelings are in fact calculations because the rapid process of calculation occurs far below our threshold of awareness. We don't feel the millions of neurons in the brain computing probabilities of survival and reproduction, so we erroneously believe that our fear of snakes, our choice of sexual mates, or our opinions about the European Union are the result of some mysterious free will. Let's see. All right. Sophisticated marketing, promoting a product or a political agenda, invest considerably in discerning the inner voice of the broad population. And this is really interesting because if you watch commercials, that's telling you what their research has shown that the mass of the consumer base, what its worldview is. Mind you, if you watch the commercials, you'll find a very diverse population. This is suggesting that the movement towards white supremacy and all of that is not in the mainstream of the mass market. They craft messages based on the worldview of the target audience. The message may appeal to a worldview that the individual really is not aware of its existence. When the NRA promotes weapons to defend yourself and your family, what is the image contained in the audience's worldview? Who are they protecting their family against? Could the image in their mind contrive an angry and aggressive person of color, let's say? Once a worldview, the bias that influenced by biases, the narrative in your head and all of that, once that becomes entrenched, it's extremely difficult to alter it. Please note that I'm not referring to differing viewpoints on an issue. I'm talking about the feelings and the attitudes that an individual brings to an interaction about viewpoints. They are engaging in a discussion or a debate with a predisposition based on their worldview, so that if you're going to talk to someone about whatever controversial issue we have going on, and you're wanting to express your rationale, your reasoning, stuff you've read in doing some research, and that other person is intransigent, it is that they have their view and nothing is going to chisel through that to make a difference. Let me, I think I'll have to do this way. I had planned on having a slide up while we listened to this podcast for a few minutes, but I want you to understand this is a discussion about people who are fervent Trump supporters who, despite all the controversies around it, they've already committed themselves to that, and they've made a sacrifice. They've also, they've had conflicts with friends, family, and now they're in so deep, no matter what is presented, they can't change.
Welcome to our On Point special podcast series. This is episode 2 of our new weekly conversations with Jack Beatty, On Point news analyst, where Jack brings us his truly unique analysis of America in our current political moment. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, and hello there, Jack.
Hello, Meghna.
Okay, so what's the single most emblematic word you can think of that encapsulates what today's conversation is all about?
Sacrifice.
Ha, sacrifice. Okay, now you got me interested, Jack. So what do you mean by sacrifice?
Well, I managed to control my empathy for Donald Trump, but not so his supporters, especially after reading a Twitter tweet by Molly Hemingway. She's the conservative pundit, editor-in-chief of The Federalist. And in this tweet, she brings out, lights up, what Trump voters have had to give up for him. She writes, supporting Trump meant costs never associated with supporting Bush or Romney. Trump supporters lost friendships. Brothers and sisters stopped talking to each other. There are parents whose children disown them and grandparents who will never see their grandchildren again because they stood by Donald Trump. She concludes, every Republican has these stories. Indeed, if you Google, I lost friends because of Trump, you will get 110 million entries. Our friend Sarah Longwell, who does focus groups around the country, she's also she's the publisher of The Bulwark. She tells me that she hears this again and again from not only from Republicans, but on the other side from Democrats who said, I've had a lifelong friendship. I ended it because my friend went for Trump. And she said, this is just part of the Republican commitment to Trump that they have given up so much for him.
Yeah. Okay. So this is really, really interesting. Welcome to our On Point special podcast series. This is episode 2 of our
I just stopped it. Okay. Let's see. Let me stop that share. Okay. Share back over to this one. See if that works. Okay. Okay, so I want to point out how this phenomenon is exploited by people who want to communicate they want to change your worldview. They want to influence your worldview. They want you to believe something, but they don't want to be overt about it. They want to disguise it in a way that has you buy into a concept without your understanding what is really the private agenda at play. Before, during, and after World War II, and probably really at the point of the Great Depression, the market crash, the barons of industry feared the demise of capitalism. They joined together with the Chamber of Commerce and the National Association of Manufacturers, crafting campaigns in defense of capitalism and free enterprise, insulated from government interference. They knew their message could not be overtly communicated. It needed disguising. They created radio programs that appealed to existing worldviews, crafting to promote free enterprise and capitalism. Let's take a look at one of their. And so they created this radio program, the Radio Family Robinson. I'm just going to play a clip of this so you can get the essence of what it is they're trying to promote.
How about Valley Forge?
Oh, right. That's very good.
Well.
Go ahead, Luke. You're next. I don't suppose you'd allow Tannersville, huh?
Oh, of course not. That one's already been mentioned. Think up a new one if you can.
Why, certainly I can. There's Millville in Westchester County, New York State, where there's a big sawmill.
That's right, and just a few miles away from it, there's a miller town named after a flour mill. Of course, there must be hundreds of Millvilles and mill towns in the United States. Now, let me see. It's my turn again, isn't it? Well, how about Factoryville or Pottstown or... Oh, dear, this isn't much fun. It isn't such a good game. It's too easy.
Well, anyway, we can't get away from the fact that all these names offer convincing proof of the importance of industry to the general scheme of things in this country.
It is certainly outstanding evidence that industry has had a lot to do with the building up of the community life of the country, and through the community life, the national life. Now, that's a very good thought. I think I should put it in my book. If we ever get back to the shack and I can sit down again.
Luke, you got any idea how much further it is?
Oh.
And so they're, saying about how important industry is, and, and they'll go on and talk about free enterprise and all that is involved with that. And it's a way of getting, this becomes really a tenet of your belief system, so that it now shapes your worldview as to how you see the things, the world around you. Let me try and here. The National Association of Manufacturers generally took care to label their activities as public relations, but occasionally they slipped. Can the limitations on the use of radio be overcome, one memo asked, so as to make sustaining programs as effective for propaganda as commercial programs have been made for advertising? And so, the American Family Robinson showed that the answer was yes. They also produced a book for schools that they distributed for free to teach people, children in schools about the American individual enterprise system and why it is superior to all other systems. And let's see, I want to get to this next one. And I want to show you another program. Let me make sure. Here, share. Here we go.
And I intend to ask one or two questions, which you too have probably asked. Then I intend to answer them. America for 300 years has been the land of promise for the rest of the world, the land of new frontiers, new opportunities for all. Today, the job of building this nation geographically is completed. There are no new frontiers within our borders. So, here are my questions and yours. To what new horizons can we look now? Where are tomorrow's opportunities? What's ahead in America for you, for your children? It is not a difficult assignment to answer these questions. The frontiers of the future are not on any map. They are in the minds of men and in the test tubes and laboratories of the great industries we have built up here in America. But now, what's ahead of us? Many of us have had our doubts. There are those who say today that opportunities have ceased to exist. Things are finished. We have everything and not enough. There can be no more progress. Almost 100 years ago, in the old patent office in Washington, the commissioner of patents was just as pessimistic as anyone you have ever heard.
Advancement of our arts from year to year taxes our credulity and seems to presage the arrival of that period when human improvements must end.
In other words, In 1844, the commissioner was about ready to shut up the patent office and go home, believing that everything had been invented, that industrial progress in America had already come to an end. He didn't know that within 2 years he would be signing a patent on a method of vulcanizing rubber from which there was destined to spring up hundreds of new industries and jobs by the thousands that were made possible through this one idea. No, the pessimists of that day never dreamed of the marvels that would soon follow their predictions. They overlooked one all-important fact that we should know so well. That is, as long as there is a problem to be solved or a desire to be met, American ingenuity will not rest. Today, industry in this country is spending over $200 million a year to improve old products and develop new products, which mean new industries, new jobs. They are working constantly to solve.
Now, let me quickly add that he's talking about how industry is investing money in this research and development. Mind you, when he talks about how we came up with vulcanized rubber and other things like that, he's kind of attributing that to the work of industry. Actually, it was government that did that research and development that led that entire effort to make those things happen. Just as it was government that created the internet, that did the research on computers, that all of the stuff that's driving our industry today came not from industry, but from government that then got transferred to industry. So it's important to have that in mind when we start talking about these things. So understanding the worldview is critical for understanding people that we engage on a daily basis, and understanding those who we will never meet, but whose actions impact us. It means placing yourself in the shoes of another and empathically trying to understanding how they see the world based upon the data that is shaping their worldview. You know, you can think that when we have interactions, it's clearly, you know, an open dialogue, but it rarely is. It is one intransigent position facing another intransigent position. And so I think the understanding of worldview is critical in understanding the world of psychology and psychiatry. I'm convinced that what goes on in many counseling sessions is really trying to communicate with the person's worldview to try to alter it so they can see things that they've had as experiences in a new way. And to see it in a new way means cracking through the existing worldview. Well, okay, we got through the through the audio-visual stuff without too many glitches with the new and improved Zoom. So we can now open for discussions and comments, please.
Our new worldview might be that Zoom is after all of us to kill us off. If anyone has any questions or comments, you know, you can use the raise the hand feature or throw the questions into chat and we will get to them. Or if Dr. Bordan comes back and has anything that she wants to add to this. So we kind of got an understanding of how the worldview affects your outlook, but certainly not much of an insight into how anyone's worldview can be swayed or changed or adjusted in any way
Well, consider the approach that was taken by the National Association of Manufacturers, which was to craft messages in a long-term campaign to influence how people's worldview would develop, to try to get in even at the point that kids are in school. Imagine if we had programs from the Environmental Protection Agency crafted in the same way to highlight why we have to clean water, why we have to clean air, and done in a very sophisticated way, such as NAM has done. Mind you, if you talk to broad scale sample of Americans and you bring up ideas like communism, socialism, those things are locked in people's heads, what those words mean. And it may have nothing to do with what the actual philosophy is about. So, they were effective. And if, if we want a different change of public attitude, it's got to be done through mass communication and that sort of thing. Yeah.
And, so what you're trying to do is kind of crack their worldview and let a sliver of light come in from another point of view, I guess. So
right.
if we cross the line from influencing people to propaganda, I guess.
The difference between propaganda and influencing people is that they're two different phrases, but they're the same thing.
I think when we discuss cognitive brief therapy, we'll see that. We'll see the introduction of new ways of thinking that really do shape worldview. And one of the risks is that you might go to a therapist who, certainly not deliberately, but has a worldview and will challenge the way you are thinking and feeling and behavior based on his or her worldview, which might differ from yours.
Oh gosh, a whole nother aspect of it.
Sure.
Margita, what do you have?
I see that, we can't help it. Our brains, are pattern based. We need to understand the world from when we're little. And that's the mechanism, right? And every country, every culture uses their school systems, schools, education, churches, and of course, political messages to instill that worldview that happens to be the dominant one at that point through the textbooks. And of course, you can get, either laugh or cry when you pick up old historical textbooks, right? And right now we have, it's like a circle, obviously during slavery, after slavery, Reconstruction, textbooks look different. What churches and schools in certain areas taught were based on their worldview, that their slave economy was the best possible world. Later on, things got changed. It became more liberal. The liberal view was able to change the textbooks, the education, to give a more accurate historical, more accurate than before, I should say. Then you have the McCarthy hearings, right? Like it goes back and forth, back and forth. And at this point, education is considered way, way, way too liberal for the right wing. And they're interfering with our educational process by actually pulling books, whether they're from the library or in certain states now, you cannot they actually edit the textbooks, and it becomes all mealy-mouthed again, or total lies. So education. The schools, public schools, are a powerful way to impart the worldview of whatever the government in power or the mainstream is now believing, to perpetuate that. But then you have these countercurrents. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you get the majority to be vigilant and have as much truth be told through textbooks, education, and prepare kids for the future, hopefully they will not clash with their family's views, because that's another problem, right? But there is no other way to form worldviews. It has to come from small to older, and then hopefully, if a person is having problems with their fake worldview and it comes to their attention or is brought by voluntarily or in other ways, there are ways now to counteract that, as we know, but it's not an easy way. But our brains are our brains. We are stuck with this clunker, and need to make the best of it.
Well, I think it's important to understand the phenomenon of the worldview that gets constructed in our brains and how rigid it can become, and that there are also forces that are using very sophisticated means to be able to impact how people see the world. And they use, mass communications and disinformation and a whole bunch of techniques. And it's important to be cognizant of it. Yeah. Thanks, Marie.
Yeah. Howard/Tim, what do you have?
Yes. When I was in school, in grade school and college and graduate school, I never felt that somebody was trying to indoctrinate a view to myself. The thing that came out the most was to think critically, to question, to explore, to examine. One thing I remember from a high school, a teacher said, vote with your dollars. Okay, so that has stuck with me, that I don't buy things or contribute to things that are counter to my worldview, if you will. If I'm at a business or something and it isn't right, I never chase a business person for them to take my dollars. Now, the other thing is worldview. This is different for everybody. I have had the good graces of seeing much of the world through my work, and all of my work lifetime has been overseas in different cultures and religions and societies and languages and beliefs and mores and so on and so forth. So I have this melange, if you will, of thoughts, of experiences. So my worldview is, except for Latin America, because I don't speak Spanish, is different than someone who, say, has never left Atlanta, for example. So the term world view is somewhat ambiguous for me.
Yeah, no, look, Tim, I think when for you, when you take all of your experiences, you see the world and the events around you through all of that, through all of those experiences, as does everyone. And it's important to know that I think it's important that if I'm interacting with someone who has completely different experiences than me and their worldview differs from mine, it's not that they're crazy. It's that they may have experienced stuff that I haven't. And but for many people, when they do encounter someone who they see as if I take someone who was marching in Charlottesville, you know, they will not replace us and all of that. And that person's worldview is completely different, not all of it possibly, but it's completely different from my worldview. Now, I don't think that I don't think of them as being insane. I think of them as, what I'm interested in is what fed their brain with information that they have embraced and integrated into themselves. Where did that come from? What is the root of that? Because I want to, first I want to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Then I want to try to figure a way, how can I get them to not do what they're doing and see the world in a different way? Not assuming that I'm absolutely right. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong. I try to challenge my own thoughts on the basis of thoughts that I find, you know, contrary to mine. But that's it. That's the reason. It's not. It is. Now, if I think that I can influence them, how do I do it? That's the point. And it's important to know everybody's carrying their worldview. And when we say worldview, we're talking about the biases, the things you were taught from childhood, you know,
life experiences.
All of it, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gail, what do you have?
Yeah, thank you, Sal. That was getting straight towards what I have been thinking about, and I like to think of it not so much as I want to change someone else's worldview or someone else's. They're doing things that I believe are not correct, are wrong, are bad, are evil, whatever. But if you start out saying I'm right and you're wrong, you already have failed, getting nowhere. People immediately there will be a defensive. It's this brain that we live in that has defense mechanisms, and and if you start out in an adversarial approach, people are going to get more deeply entrenched in the very attitudes and worldview that you're trying to. I rather than say change, how about expand that thing about your radius, just to include more. And I hope that I can do that for myself as well, to keep open to always expanding my input. But like the manufacturing group that published the book or had the radio show and all, they don't start out saying, you don't know the answer and here's the answer that I know. Rather, they start out with going back to a shared value. Everybody believes in the value of family and these connections. So you start from there and generates your audience being some kind of receptive that we have some shared worldview, and from that build onto, and isn't industry fabulous for this shared value? And that's the whole point of your class, is it is so important to understand where these differences started and go back down the tree to where our shared values branched in different directions. But you got to know where it came from to develop a more graceful, less adversarial approach, to have a positive influence in the world we live in.
Yeah, and bringing it into the world of issues in psychology. Let's say hypothetically, we have a person who was raised in a very strict environment. And it was, you must live your life this way. You must get married, have 2.5 children, you know, and have a lifetime like that. And if it doesn't work out, then you are a huge failure and you're really under great distress. And then that person goes to see a counselor. And the counselor now is confronting all this history in this person that they're ready to commit suicide because stuff didn't work out as had been prescribed for them. That counselor now has to deal with that worldview. They have to try to relive it, try to, get the person to see that, life is still worth living. And, all of that becomes a part. I'm using that as an extreme example, but it has a direct relevance to it all. Yeah. Terry? Terry, you're muted. There you go.
Okay. A practical tip for everybody is if you want to engage somebody in conversation and your worldview or whatever you want to call it is different from theirs, but you want to know more about theirs, there's something really easy, and that is to change a why to what. Why makes you defensive? Why am I this way? I'll tell you why I'm this way. But what makes you think that? It's just, and it's such a simple tip, so that you can engage in a non-adversarial manner. And sure, I mean, there are a lot of counselors, a lot of therapists that do have clients whose worldview is very, very different from theirs. And they're even people, when you think about it, and they're not professional counselors, but they have experience dealing with people coming out of a cult, parents employing these individuals to deprogram their child. It's very complicated. And I think with what Sal has been showing us class after class is the rewiring of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about rewire the brain.
But there has to be some willingness for rewiring as well, I would think.
It does. And sometimes, that's why a lot of therapists, if you call and say, I want to make an appointment for my sister or husband, they'll go, no, I want the husband, sister to call me. But, sometimes, especially in addiction, if they're going to lose a job or they're going to lose a marriage or they're going to lose something very important to them, custody of a child, even though the motivation isn't there, it can work.
James, what do you have?
First of all, I'll say I agree with all you have to say, but the problem is this is a totally Eurocentric point of view from a science that is Eurocentric, and you don't take into account free literate societies or people of color. And I would say that's true even in the United States. And it was interesting that all of the people that you used in your examples, except for one, was white.
Well, what do you think is different for people of color as it relates to worldview?
No, I think the effects of slavery and the way things are in the United States even now are shape our worldview, and and for instance, I would say that the Republicans are pointing out a particular position that the United States is not the United States, but the majority of whites in this country adhere to.
Well, yeah,
That's strictly from a Black point of view.
yeah, no, I understand. Well, but you see, I think that the concepts are universal in that if I did a study on the Japanese soldier in World Wars I and II, I would find a dramatic change had taken place between what their views and how they looked at warfare in the 1850s after being isolationists for 2 centuries. Those things had to change to get them to where that worldview that they had to change to get them to become aggressive in attacking others, in attacking Nanking. So
I doubt that that's true. And do you know how many psychiatrists do you have from Japan, China, Africa, and South America?
I have no idea.
I don't think there are very, very, very few, and the ones that you have are primarily educated in the West.
Yeah, I had a lot of students from mainland China. I had a lot of students from Taiwan, had students from Africa. So times are changing, but it's so true. We see things with our worldview. Like if someone were to come to a therapist and say that my father died a week ago, but I speak with him every night and he tells me what to do, and they're very specific about their interactions with someone who died, we almost want to put a hospital bracelet on that person.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other cultures where absolutely they do believe, especially with recent death, that there can be communication. So we do filter through our own eyes, and it's true. It's true. That's why I've always said to the students, if we speak with someone from another culture, we're going to learn as much from them, if not more, than they learn from us. And I always used to say to people, please tell me if I suggest something that doesn't work in your country, if I suggest something that really doesn't match. And I remember I had a Japanese student, and there was somebody, and the person was in debt, and we were talking about what the therapist would do. And of course, I said, well, one of the things we want to do, first of all, is find out what kind of debt are we talking about? Are we talking about $10,000 in debt? Are we talking about $3 million in debt? And the Japanese student said, no, 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 we could never ask that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was true. I remember in Rochester when I was in therapy, first of all, you had to teach the therapist what your culture was like. And then you could go on and teach them, and then they could help you. And that was true of a number of Blacks that I met that had gone into therapy.
Very much so.
Wow, good. Margita, we're running over, so I'm going to ask if you have one more thing, just to make it kind of quick, please.
Yes. So somebody just mentioned the example of modern day political situation in the U.S. And the one thing I wanted to say, I appreciate everybody being so noble and spending a lot of time of asking why, etc. But my thought is, at this point in time, if a worldview or a view of society and how people should live together breaks down a democratic system, then that's the end of it. You know, we need to intervene in that. You cannot have a different worldview come by force and change our democracy. So worldview, schmerview, there's also reality, political reality. And rather than sitting, you know, singing Kumbaya and, oh, what did your mother do to you in, you know, West Virginia or whatever, or your whole life background, I totally understand and it should be done, but we need to deal with it now because our democracy, our worldview in this country, which we call democratic, is in danger. And we can't spend time like we did, 4 years ago, try to figure out what we can do to change. It has to be as the ballot box. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, part of what I try to bring into these classes is that the idea that we often have a crisis in the moment, and we must look at the big, broader picture because what's happening in the moment didn't just happen. It's from things that have gone on for a very long time. And to fix a problem that has been marinating for 75, 100 years, 200 years, there aren't any quick fixes. There's no simple solutions and easy answers to it. The idea of looking at the brain and how it works and what influences it brings to bear is hopefully to give some insight to it so we can help to explain what's going on and then to be able to craft strategies for addressing whatever issues we find. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about character. How does character develop in a person and what does it mean? And hopefully you'll see the relevance of that. Okay.
If anyone would like to unmute themselves and give Sal and Terry a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming.
You bet.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
See you guys next week.
Gracie.
I think so.